What is up, YouTube? So, some very interesting words and criticisms from Coach Dabo Swinney today in his weekly Tuesday press conference at Clemson as it pertains to college football officiating. And I know what a lot of people are going to say. You know, he was very vocal and upset about one particular call last week against Duke at the end of the game. Now, I've been saying I don't think that cost them the game. It was obviously a crucial call, but they gave up 45 points or 46 points at home. That's why they lost the game. But I've been saying this for a while, and he pointed out some things that I think prove what a lot of us have been saying, or at least validate a lot of our grievances about what's been going on for years now in college football officiating. And a lot of people only tend to focus on bad calls against their own teams because, well, a lot of people only watch their own team. So that's all that they're concerned with. And a lot of people think that if they lose a game, if there's bad calls in a game against their team, that somehow that means the refs are in on it, or the refs want your team to lose for some reason. And I don't really think that's the case. I think there's just a systemic problem in officiating as a whole and the way they deal with bad officials. And that's kind of what Dabo Swinney got into today that I haven't heard a lot of other coaches, especially active head coaches, talk about. One of the things that he said was each week in college football, the coaches or the program or whatever can submit up to 10 grievances when it comes to calls. And they'll review them and they'll get back to you on whether or not they agree that they were bad calls or not. So he didn't say which game it was. I don't even think he's allowed to. I think that's why he didn't say. Or maybe he is allowed to, but he runs the risk of getting fined like he just did last week, $10,000 for criticizing the officials. But anyway, he said there's a game earlier this year that Clemson lost that he wanted to submit 14 what he thought were bad or no calls in that game against Clemson. Well, you're only allowed to submit 10. For what reason? I don't know. I don't know why they came up with the number of 10. Is it a time issue? Anyway, that's irrelevant. So he sends in 10. He says he's 100% sure in his mind that at least 8 of those, there might have been 2 that were borderline questionable, but at least 8 were 100% bad calls. They came back and said, well, we reviewed the 10. 5 of these are definitely bad calls. So they admit that half of the calls that he submitted, at least, were the wrong calls. That's a 50% failure rate in submissions. And that's just in one game. I can't imagine if there's any other coaches out there. I'm sure they're all experiencing the same issue. This isn't a Clemson thing, like I said. This is a systemic issue across college football. And what happens when they admit to making 5 egregiously bad calls in the game? Nothing. That's the problem. In Dabo's words, and I agree with him, there's no accountability at all for the refs. They admit to making bad calls, and they say, sorry, we'll do better next time. And of course, they don't do better next time. There's no fines handed down. Well, we did see the one ref get fired from, I guess, making a bunch of bad calls in the Georgia and Auburn game earlier this year, but that's few and far between. So the refs aren't held accountable. The refs aren't full-time employees. He also brought that up, which I thought was interesting, because that's been something that we've talked about on this channel a lot over the years, is that if you have a bunch of guys who are only making $50,000 a season or $60,000 a season, and they've got a wife and a mortgage and 4 kids that are in college, on top of everything else, inflation and the economy, that's not enough for them to sustain a living off of that. So what do they have to do? They're a dentist or an accountant or whatever throughout the year, And then they show up on Saturday and they're officiating college football games where people are making billions of dollars. Players are now making millions of dollars. Coaches are making tens of millions of dollars. Universities are making hundreds of millions of dollars or even billions of dollars. There's a lot of people making a lot of money in the sport, more than ever before. And you've got basically weekend warriors out there deciding the fate of these games. That's a problem. They need to be full-time employees, paid a good wage, and spend year-round, not 3 months a year, not 4 months a year, on training and learning how to make these calls right. He also brought up an idea, a lot like to do in the NFL. If there's a bad call, the coaches need to be able to challenge these calls. There needs to be accountability, challenges, fines if need be, and of course, they're very rare, what we saw this year, firing. He also did bring up something that a lot of people are talking about, but nobody in the college football universe, especially not a head coach of a football team, seems to really say out loud. It's been a big issue, especially over the past 3 or 4 years, with gambling becoming legal in a lot of these different states, sports gambling becoming legal. We saw what happened with John Mateer. There's been examples throughout history of dirty refs or players throwing games. I mean, this precedes legalized gambling in individual states. This has always been an issue. But he said, you got a lot with all the gambling that's going on now legally. He said refs are only human too. Now, I don't know how you can't legislate that. First of all, you would have to prove that a ref is throwing or making bad calls because of a bet that he made, which is a whole nother can of worms. And I know a lot of people believe that everything is rigged. I've been over this 100 times. Everything is rigged. It's all scripted. It's all bought and paid for. But these people continue to watch the sport every week, even though they believe that it's all fake. But they continue to watch it each week. Does that go on? Anytime there's money involved, there's going to be some of that happens. That's just the way it is. I don't think that that's the norm in every football game. Every football is fixed. Every ref is paid off. Every ref wants Alabama to beat Georgia. Every ref wants X team to beat Y team, and because they got a bet on it or whatever. Of course, there's always going to be a couple of bad apples. It's no different than any other profession. I mean, there's bad everything. There's bad doctors. There's bad cops. There's bad whatever. Every profession. Bad YouTubers. A bunch of those. Shout out to Salita. Anyway, you get my point. I don't really know if complaining about gambling is going to get you where you want to go as far as your gripes with refereeing. But I do think, though, that Dabo Swinney made a lot of good points. Dabo says a lot of things that I don't agree with, that I think are kind of silly a lot of times. But it was kind of refreshing, and it wouldn't matter who the coach is. If Mike Norvell came out and said the same thing that Dabo said today, I'd agree with him. As much as I can't stand Donut Dave Dorn at NC State, if Dave Dorn said these things that Dabo Swinney said today, it's not who was delivering the message. It was the message that Dabo Swinney was sending that I agreed with. Partly because I've been saying it for years. You just don't see a current head coach of a major football program, and maybe some of you can correct me. Has there been another coach that said this publicly in the manner that Dabo did today? You probably need to go back and listen to all of his comments if you haven't heard him. I'm sure you can look him up on YouTube. I saw it on Twitter, but it's out there. And so I agree with him, and I think probably a lot of coaches agree with him. I think they have similar experiences to him. I'm sure they do, and I'm sure they agree with him. And I would like to see some more coaches come out and say that there needs to be some sort of reform in the way that officiating is handled in college football. That's just the bottom line. I mean, you guys watch these games each week, you see what I see across the nation. It's really unbelievable. It seems like it's getting worse, not better. So they got to do something. They got to do something. Anyway, let me know. Comment, subscribe, like, hype. I'll push all those buttons on there. And, of course, leave a comment. Let me know what you think about this. Have a good day.